Hello, everyone. You're listening to Psychology Outside the Box. My name is Dr. Flower. I have a PhD in psychology, so I'm not a wannabe or a knockoff. I've been teaching college and university courses for 20 years. Psychology is a vast field that connects to many things in your life. If you have a curious mind, you're definitely in the right place. So sit back and enjoy the ride. According to folklore, there are really only two ways to tell if someone is lying. The story of Pinocchio demonstrates the nose grows longer when someone lies. We also know that a liar has pants on fire. I wish, if this were true, political campaigns would be a lot more exciting, and firefighters would be kept busy attending every speech. Personally, I am always disappointed when a liar's pants do not actually catch on fire. Where's spontaneous combustion when you really need it? Lying is an all too common part of life. Although all of us may lie on occasion, there are some people who lie much more often and are called prolific liars. A new study reported in 2021 tracked people's lying every day over 3 months. More than 630 participants were asked to keep a daily deception journal, producing 116,336 lies. The results showed about 3/4 of study participants were consistently honest, telling between 0 and 2 lies per day. By contrast, a small subset of people, about 6%, averaged more than 6 lies every day and were responsible for a sizable proportion of all the lies. And some prolific liars were telling more than 15 lies per day every day. Is it considered a lie if you believe it? A lie requires intent. If you genuinely think you are telling the truth, then you are not really lying. But you still may be a clueless idiot. According to mental health experts, many pathological and compulsive liars do believe the stories they're telling. They may have repeated their lies so often that they start to feel true. How good are we at recognizing deception by others? Do you remember the TV show called Lie to Me that was popular a few years ago? The show followed the work of Dr. Lightman, played by Tim Roth, and his colleagues. Apparently, they had devised ways to detect when someone was lying or telling the truth by analyzing facial expressions, body movements, and changes in voice and speech. In other words, the show was based on the idea that people, even very good liars, display some small, uncontrollable expressions that can be observed by someone trained to identify them. These beliefs are widespread across the general population and also among law enforcement professionals. But guess what? They are completely wrong. On television, it all looks so easy, but in the real world, average people and even so-called experts are actually very poor lie detectors. That is because there are no definitive signs that show when a person is lying. There's no muscle twitch, no facial expression, no eye movement or gesture that proves that a person is lying with any certainty. All these behaviors sometimes occur, but are equally likely to happen in liars and truth-tellers. Nonverbal cues to deception, of which there are many, can be separated into two types: visual cues such as body movements, lack of eye contact, or being nervous, and vocal cues such as stuttering, pitch of voice, and amount of time it takes to respond. A lot of people believe that eye contact and the amount of fidgeting are two of the best indicators of lie telling, but the evidence contradicts these misconceptions. Howard Ehrlichman, a psychologist who has been studying eye gaze since the 1970s, has found that eye movements do not indicate lying at all. In fact, he suggests that shifting eyes mean that a person is thinking or more precisely, that he or she is searching their long-term memory. So evidence of lies is not in the eyes. When it comes to lie detection, the experts perform just as poorly as inexperienced people do. While many people think that they can perceive deceit, the strategies that most people use to evaluate truthfulness are no more effective than flipping a coin, roughly a 50-50 chance. An extensive analysis by Bond and DiPaolo in 2006 was based on a database of more than 25,000 veracity judgments. In other words, they had to listen to a variety of statements and then try to figure out if the person was lying or else telling the truth. The accuracy rate for distinguishing liars from truth tellers in this particular study was merely 54%. None of the professionals that we might expect to be good lie detectors, such as police investigators, psychiatrists, interviewers in recruiting companies, they did not score better than a person who had no training at all. In 1991, Ekman and Sullivan studied people whose professions depend on the ability to distinguish between lie tellers and truth tellers, including customs officials, police officers, judges, FBI agents, and forensic psychiatrists. These so-called experts performed very close to 50% when judging the honesty of videotape speakers. U.S. secret agents did a little better with 64% accuracy. In general, we do only a little bit better than chance in determining whether others are lying or telling the truth. So we would be equally accurate if we simply flipped a coin to decide if someone is lying or not. So the evidence is quite clear. There are no indicators or clues that will tell us whether a person is lying or not. There is nothing in their facial expression or in their voice or in their behavior that will indicate a lie. Nonetheless, there are still plenty of different sites on the internet that will tell you that there are ways of identifying a liar. This, of course, is wrong. But sometimes it's really difficult to eliminate strong beliefs, even when they're absolutely wrong. So it is not surprising to find numerous sites on the internet that claim to tell us how we can identify liars by their mannerisms. This is just wishful thinking or sometimes dishonesty. Google search identifies many sites that provide 6, 9, 10, 12, 17, 21, or 34 telltale signs that someone is lying to you. Before listing the signs, the author usually warns the reader that there's really no clear-cut signal, verbal or nonverbal, that points to definite deception. Well, they tell us that it may not work, but then the list is provided just the same. So let's see what some of the lists have to say. Yes, these items were based on real lists, and yes, they are often contradictory, so please don't blame me for that. Apparently, liars may either stare at you or possibly look away. They may provide too many details or sometimes not enough. Oh yes, that does make sense. Liars do not and will not use contractions such as can't or won't. I can't agree more with that statement. They may fidget, shuffle their feet, or sometimes they stand very still. They may pause or hesitate, or perhaps they speed up their speech. Their pupils may dilate, in other words, get wider. So sit very close and stare intently into the person's eyes to verify this. A liar may sweat and the pulse may quicken, so sit very close to check their Fitbit, and don't be afraid to sniff the underarms. There may be micro-facial expressions that flash briefly across their faces, so do not blink or you will miss these completely. So these internet lists will not work when you see a YouTube video of someone who claims that they know exactly how to identify when someone is lying or not. Don't believe them. Nobody can. Even the most highly trained experts are no more than about 50% accurate in identifying when someone is lying or telling the truth. It's quicker and easier to just flip a coin. Okay, so now we know that humans are pretty lousy lie detectors. But what about the lie detector machine, known as the polygraph? In 2018, Wired magazine estimated that about 2.5 million polygraph tests were given each year in the United States. The earliest polygraph machines have been used since the 1920s, and so have been around for more than 100 years. You've seen polygraph tests 1,000 times on crime dramas and daytime TV. The American Polygraph Association claims the accuracy of the polygraph to be 87%. But the National Research Council has found no evidence of effectiveness. A comprehensive 2003 review by the National Academy of Sciences concluded that polygraph, or the use of nonverbal cues and body language, are useless in detecting lies. In the 2007 peer-reviewed article, Charlatanry in Forensic Speech Science, the authors reviewed 50 years of lie detector research and came to the conclusion that there is no scientific evidence showing that lie detectors actually work. To this day, polygraph results are not admissible in most courts. The U.S. Supreme Court ruled that criminal defendants could not admit polygraph evidence in their defense. A polygraph can't actually detect lies. As a person is questioned about a certain event or incident, the examiner looks to see how the person's heart rate, blood pressure, respiration, and electrodermal activity, which is a fancy way to say sweatiness, changes in comparison to normal levels. But contrary to popular opinion, it is not the machine that decides if or when the subject is lying. The machine only shows a series of squiggly lines on a graph. It is the examiner who decides if that means the person is lying or not. Like a set of fingerprints, the squiggly lines will be different for every person. There is no single pattern that sounds an alarm or causes red lights to flash when a person is lying. It is a completely human decision and a very subjective process that produces many errors. The polygraph can certainly measure bodily functions with reasonable accuracy, just like a Fitbit can measure heart rate. The big problem is making a huge leap from these measures to conclude that someone is lying. Does elevated heart rate always indicate that someone is lying? And if someone is calm and relaxed with no heart rate increase, does it necessarily mean they are being truthful? Of course not. It's just not that simple or easy. Otherwise, we could use our Fitbit as a portable lie detector at home, with friends, and at work. Elevated levels of heart rate, blood pressure, and respiration may sometimes be associated with fear and anxiety. It is no surprise that people being questioned under pressure may be anxious, even when telling the truth. Even a completely innocent person may be fearful or nervous about being falsely accused and maybe even going to jail for something they didn't do. Thus, polygraph tests often lead to allegations of lying against people who are truly innocent. As well, some people can lie without experiencing any anxiety. The more practice you have had with lying, the less anxiety is associated with it. So beating or fooling the polygraph is really not too difficult. In one of the worst failures of the polygraph, a killer passed and an innocent man failed the polygraph during the murder investigation of Viola Manville in 1988. After failing the polygraph administered by the New York State Police, detectives were able to get the innocent man, Frank Sterling, to confess to the murder. Sterling was then convicted and sent to prison. But the actual killer, Mark Christie, had passed the polygraph and later went on to abduct and murder 4-year-old Callie Ann Holton. Christie was eventually convicted of her murder and also Manville's murder. If the polygraph had accurately identified Christie as the killer, Callie Ann Holton would still be alive and Frank Sterling would not have spent 22 years in prison for a crime that he did not commit. Serial killer Gary Ridgway, known as the Green River Killer, murdered at least 49 women in Washington state before he was caught in 2001. Initially, Ridgway was a suspect in the killing of 4 women and was given a polygraph in 1984, which he passed. At the time, investigators were mainly focused on an innocent suspect, Melvin Foster, who had failed the polygraph test. Ridgway was dropped as a suspect and went on to kill another 45 women and perhaps even more. Ridgway was eventually identified as the killer through DNA evidence and was convicted in 2003 for the murders of 48 women. The failure of the polygraph cost at least 44 women their lives. The biggest failure of the polygraph at the CIA was that of Aldrich Ames. While working in a very sensitive position at the CIA, Ames betrayed the U.S. and sold the names of CIA operatives working in the Soviet Union to the KGB. Ames received $4.6 million from the Soviets, which allowed him to enjoy a luxury lifestyle. In 1986 and again in 1991, Ames passed 2 polygraph examinations while spying for the Soviet Union. He was scared about taking the test, but the KGB just told him to relax. At least 10 CIA operatives that were identified by Ames were executed by the KGB. Another disastrous failure for the polygraph. Later on, Ames was asked how he fooled the polygraph test. He explained it this way:
"There's no special magic. Confidence is what it takes. Confidence in a friendly relationship with the examiner. Rapport, where you smile and you make him think that you like him. Making the examiner believe that the exam has no importance to you seals the deal."
In other words, a polygraph test can be fooled and be completely wrong, even in the most serious circumstances with many lives at stake. As well, innocent people may fail the polygraph and end up spending many years in prison for crimes they did not commit. The guilty person is then free to complete even more crimes. So, given the lack of scientific evidence about accuracy, we can assume that lie detectors are no longer used anywhere. Wrong, wrong, wrong. Law enforcement personnel who are supposed to rely on hard evidence routinely ignore more than 60 years of scientific research showing that this technique is almost worthless. The unpleasant truth about lie detectors hasn't stopped the use of polygraphs for criminal investigation. The U.S. military, the federal government, and other agencies have also made a lot of use of the polygraph in deciding a person's suitability for employment and security clearance. For example, the FBI gives a polygraph test to every single person who's considered for a job there. And with every mistake, someone's career or future may be put in serious jeopardy. The polygraph test doesn't work as advertised and never did. Analyzing facial expressions, body movements, and changes in voice and speech are also quite useless. But even with overwhelming evidence of failure, lots of people refuse to give up on the polygraph. Apparently, false hopes and wishful thinking are much stronger than scientific facts. It seems we pay attention to facts, but only when they support our beliefs. When superhero Wonder Woman catches someone in her golden lariat, she can force that person to speak the absolute truth. It's a handy tool for battling evil supervillains. But in the real world, it is surprisingly hard to create a real-life lasso of truth. All good things must come to an end, including this podcast. But in the words of the Terminator,
I be Buck.
And I hope you will too. Okay, folks, it's all over for today. We're finished. We reached the end. You don't have to go home, but you can't stay here. I will miss you so very much.